And anyway, he came over eventually and said, do you want to dance? And so we did this, we did a slow dance together. And it was electric and incredible. And, it was the first time that I felt a man's erection through his trousers during a dance. And it was like, this guy is absolutely beyond my league.
Hello, I am Kay Anderson, and you are listening to Lost Spaces, the podcast that mourns the death of queer nightlife. Every episode, I talk to a different person about a venue from their past, the memories they created there, and the people that they used to know. This week, we are headed back in time to the early 80s and small-ish town England with the writer David Ledain, author of This Forbidden Fruit, Having Gay Sex, and his most well-known book, Gay Dad, a non-fiction book that compiles the stories of gay men who married women and started families. We talked all about his experiences of dipping his toe in gay life at Granny's nightclub in Portsmouth, grappling with his sexuality, and then deciding to turn his back on it. We also talk about all the men he remembers from those days, so get ready for some lusting and reminiscing about men that he hasn't seen for almost 40 years.
I didn't know it existed. I didn't know that was a thing outside of London. How on earth did this group of people know that this bar was a gay bar? Because from the outside, you wouldn't know. And it's tucked down a little street in a cathedral city. So anyway, we went as a group to this bar to see what it was like.
So who's we?
Well, me and a few friends from Portsmouth Polytechnic.
Ah.
They didn't know at the time that I was gay. I'm not even sure that I knew that I was gay at the time. But I was desperate to explore this avenue, this place, and to see what it was like. I don't know what I expected. I think I expected something, that you would have thought of in London, with glitter balls and dancing around poles and on the podiums and stuff. I don't know.
The smell of poppers hitting you as you walk through the front door.
Yeah. And the toilet's absolutely packed. But it wasn't like that at all. It was just an ordinary pub.
But so sorry, I'm just
old men.
I'm just fixated on this, the group that you went with. Was it like, oh, let's check it out, wink wink, nudge nudge, let's go and see those gays?
Well, was it like that? I don't know, actually. I think it was a bit of a thrill, a bit of an excitement. I mean, we didn't go to cause disruption or anything like that. I think the sort of the thing was to go and see it for the curiosity to discover what this place was like. But I think there was about 4 or 5 of us and a couple of girls as well. Yeah, and I just think we sort of went along just to see what was happening. I don't think we even stayed very long. I think we just had a drink and thought, well, this is a bit dull. So went off to somewhere else that was where all the young cool kids hung out. But of course that place had clicked in my mind now. So I knew that if I wanted to meet other guys, that was the place to go. And it was only a train journey away, 20 minutes on the train, and I'd be there.
But so what was that first time like? So you went with a group of people who you knew from Polytechnic, who assumed you were straight, and you knew that you weren't straight, and this was the first time you went to a gay bar, and you kind of had to sit there and balance those two personas. Were you just terrified to say anything or look at anyone?
Yes.
Linger on their butts.
Yeah, because of course we were, in our late teens. We were beautiful and dressed, trendy, and so of course people were looking at us. But I guess that was all part of the game. That was part of the party.
Yeah.
I think, yes, I was terrified of one of them saying something to me personally. Within the group. If someone had said to me something about me being gay and this is where you should be hanging out, then I would have completely denied it and, been very macho about it and said, you must be joking, that wouldn't have worked well. Strange. But we present this facade to the world. And, when I look back on photos and things, and, the way I dressed and the way I'm caught on photo, very quite camp in my pose and my, and yet no one sort of said anything. I think if someone had said, I mean,
it's that tough
on,
thing though, isn't it? Because like if someone says something, you probably would have just shut down that conversation and been defensive.
Yeah, of course.
So no one would say anything because they don't want to get into a conflict with you. So it's this kind of weird no man's land that people are in. Yeah. But anyway, sorry, I'm taking us off in the wrong direction. So now that you knew this bar existed and you knew it was just a train journey away, how long did it take from that first visit to the second visit on your own?
I can't remember. It's a long, long time ago. It's 40 years ago, more than 40 years ago.
Well, let's just, make something up, like a week, a month, 3 months.
Yes, I'm trying to think. It was probably, I know from my diaries. Unfortunately, I wasn't keeping a diary at that particular time. But I have, the diaries from around that period, and which lockdown has been brilliant because I've been able to look back on these diaries and it's just incredible how I was lying to myself.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I was having these sort of fake fantasies about girls. I like such and such a girl. Oh, she's really nice, and I really got on, and met this girl, and blah blah blah. And yet also I was fantasizing about boys.
But were you documenting the fantasies about boys, or were you just documenting girls?
No, it was both. It was both.
Okay. Oh, interesting. But when you read it back, you can tell that some of them are lies and some of them are real.
Yeah, well, I know, because the things I'm saying about the boys, the guys that I had crushes on, I still think about and I still remember. I can't remember the girls. I can't remember the girls at all.
Oh, so who are the guys? Let's talk about them.
What, name them?
Yes.
Oh, there was this one guy called Ian who used to go to the pub, who I actually did eventually have a conversation with. And he really sort of upset me by saying, oh, if we'd got together a couple of years ago, maybe there would have been something, but not now. Just sort of,
damn it. Heartbreaking.
And he was beautiful, and he was in a band, and so that was really sad. So I wrote about him a lot, how I sat next to him and how we looked at each other across the bar, and how, sitting next to him, our knees touched.
And it was electric.
Like, oh, God, yeah. And yet I talk in other bits about girls, and I say, oh, I met this really nice girl. She seems really nice, and blah, blah, blah. I can't for the life of me remember who she was or anything about her. So,
oh, how fascinating.
It was like I was, my head was desperately trying to be normal.
Yeah.
And desperately trying to, give me a world view that was normal. But my emotions and my sexual drive was completely in the opposite direction.
Wow.
I forgot what we were saying now. That.
So yeah, I was basically just like, read me your diary. No. So you eventually started going to the Bush Inn on your own.
Yes. And I can really seriously remember that first, walking in there. And in those days, I don't think pubs do this so much these days. They have like two separate bars. They have the Snug, which is like the posh bar for some reason, quiet.
Oh.
And where where little old ladies would sit and sip their sherry, and then the public bar where everyone would just hang out, and there'd be a jukebox or whatever. So
And there was no like entry requirements, like you just chose which part of the pub you wanted to be in.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there was also a back door, so that if you wanted to go in without being noticed on the street, you could sort of go through this little car park and go through the back door. I don't know if I did that, because that led into the public bar, and I wasn't quite ready for that.
Oh, so you like had in your mind, I'm going to go there and I'm going to go to the snug.
Yes, because I knew there I could just sit quietly with my drink and just waited, I guess, for someone to make the move, for someone to come to me. And the snug was empty then. I think it was like, a day in the week. It would have been a day in the week, because it would have been a day when I knew I wouldn't normally be out with my friends, because there would be parties and discos to go to and stuff. So it had to be a weekday. So anyway, I was sat there, and this guy came round and sort of looked at me, and then he went back round the other side. So obviously there'd been a conversation going on. The barman said, "Oh, there's this guy around there. He needs a bit of support. Go and look after him." And he came round, and we had a chat, and then he invited me round to meet his friends and stuff, and it was lovely. And it wasn't sort of a sexual thing, and they weren't sort of trying to. They weren't predatory or anything like that. They were just, inviting. And then I discovered that there was a nightclub in Portsmouth called Granny's that on Wednesday nights, of all nights, had a gay night. And I thought, God. And you see, I didn't know this. I just did not know this. And I'd been to this club many times on a Saturday night, but never realised that they had a gay specific night on a Wednesday night. So this guy invited me, I think, the next week to go down there. So I went to Chichester and met them at the Bush, and then we all went down to Granny's, and it was just an eye opener, and to see guys dancing together. I mean, it's just like unbelievable, and the music they played was much better than what you would normally hear.
Well, you're gonna have to so what kind of music were they playing?
Oh, like Grace Jones and Walking in the Rain from the Nightclubbing album, and that sort of stuff that was just a bit, disco beat and all that, but just a bit edgy, stuff that you wouldn't normally hear in a disco. And
so what would you normally hear, like the Nolans?
I guess so, yeah. It was more like Earth, Wind and Fire and disco music, but at Granny's on gay night at Granny's, it was a bit edgier. It was a bit more sort of cool, and Grace Jones was always cool. You wouldn't really hear Grace Jones at a disco then, and to hear that in a nightclub, and for guys to be dancing to it, and close dancing, like a tango, proper dancing, was just amazing. And and that guy who I went with, he was the first guy I slept with. So I was I'm 19 then, I guess.
So I want to hear about that, but let's hear about the first night at Granny's first. So did you dance with anyone that night?
I think we danced as a group. I can't remember dancing with anyone's, like a slow dance, but I certainly did after that. The times that I went, and I used to go on my own on a Wednesday night. Sometimes I used to drive up there, but in the times when I didn't have a car, I would just go and hope that I got off with someone,
so you could stay at theirs.
Yeah, or hitch back, from Portsmouth. It was a long way, and you just wouldn't do that these days. But that was quite normal to hitch from Portsmouth, where all the nightclubs were.
And so if you were hitching, had you rehearsed what lie you were going to tell the person if they were like, what club did you go to tonight?
Well, yeah, of course I would suss that out. And I think we all do that. And you still do that, don't you? When you come out to people, there's these sort of milliseconds of working out, their particular stance on, on how they would react.
Yeah, whether it's worth it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, some people I would say, and some people I just wouldn't. But there was one guy there that I used to meet up with quite regularly. And thinking back, I think he was married. And he used to stay in a hotel. He was an architect. And again, I had such a crush on him. And it's all written in the diary. And I think, had I played my cards right, I could have, I'm sure, had a relationship with him.
Oh, come on, there's too many coulda, woulda, shouldas in here.
And the thing is, once someone got a bit close and I could see it developing, and they'd say, I can remember having a sort of conversation with one guy who I think we'll probably talk about in a minute, the model. And he said to me, "Oh, you're lovely. I think I'm falling in love." And no, I'm not. No, that's not going to happen. Because I knew that this sort of gay life that I was leading was hidden, and it was not real, and it was all part of the shadowy world that I lived in. So I could never accept somebody into my real life.
So self-preservation kicked in whenever anyone tried to get close.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I know, again, like it's a long time ago and I'm asking very specific questions, but had you consciously made that decision, like I'm going to keep these two lives very, very separate? Or were you kind of testing the waters and trying to figure it out?
I think I didn't really want the two to meet. And I worked out a way, rather skillfully, of doing it without anybody realizing. I think as the years went on, people did realize in my group. But again, I was very particular about who knew that. Mm-hmm. And it was more often girls, mm-hmm. and people who were quite, trendy, and people who were, Earth Mother types, I guess, and people who were quite liberal in their views, and activists, I guess, activist types, I would tell. But it was just two separate lives I was living, and I think I quite enjoyed that in a way. On a Saturday night, I'd go out with my other friends, and we'd go clubbing or whatever, and they had no idea what I'd been up to in the week.
But then, does that not get exhausting? Like, if people are like, "So what have you been doing this week?" and you're just like, "Oh, just nothing."
Well, yeah. I mean, we tended not to go out during the week because the pubs always used to close at 10:30, I think it was. And of course, yeah,
Scandal.
I know. It's bizarre.
No, I quite like that though, because then you can get home, you can be in bed by midnight and you don't have to feel guilty that you're missing out on anything.
The thing is, I didn't always used to go home. Then I used to sort of cruise around, because I knew. But by this point, I was sussing out all the different places that you could go, to pick guys up, the park and the toilets around the back of the shops or whatever. And so I was getting into this, and again in the diaries, it's like this torment about don't do it. What a waste of time, and it's not going to end well, and all this stuff. But wow. I just couldn't find a way of finding a group of people who I could live a life with and be interacted with.
Mm. And then, so this group that you went to Granny's with the first night, was it just like they were cool for hanging out with, but they weren't going to be the friend group?
Yeah, I mean, it's you click with some people, don't you, and others you don't. And I think they had their own cliques. And their own groups, and I was sort of, because I wasn't hanging out with them all the time. It was only on a Wednesday night down at Granny's, that I would be involved with them, and we'd meet in the pub beforehand, and the guy that who originally introduced me to the place, and who I slept with, I can't remember him after that. I mean, he must have been there, but we obviously drifted apart.
He's no Ian, is he?
He was no Ian, and he was no architect either. The architect guy, who I, oh God, yeah. That was crazy. And I remember going back to the hotel with him, and after our session, climbing out the window. because he was on the ground floor, because I couldn't, go back through the reception
He
because the
didn't want them to
receptionist
see
could
you.
see.
Oh,
So I had to climb
wow.
out through the window. Just bizarre way of living. And my other friends who I would consider my besties or whatever, they had no idea that this was going on. Absolutely none.
There's something really fascinating about this, the addictiveness of having the secret.
Yes, there is that, but also I think it's the addictiveness of sex, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
that thing. It's wanting. It's like a drug, once you've done it once or a couple of times, you think, I've got to get more of this. This is what I need. So it was that. It was sex. That's what that was. Climbing out of hotel windows.
But with the architect, was there not something more? Is that not what you were saying earlier? Like it was more than sex to you, or was it just really good sex?
It was. There was something more, because as I say, I think he was married, so we both had these other lives going on. So our Wednesday nights that we used to meet up, and probably it was only, I don't know, for a few months or whatever. I can't recall really how long it went on for. So I think it fitted us well. So we'd meet up and we'd be together, and then we'd go home together, or we'd go back to his hotel together afterwards. And then it was like, well, see you next week, or he'd make some excuse why he couldn't be there next week, and I'd say, well, okay, well, see you the week after or whatever. And I never pushed it, and maybe I didn't even realise, but I think now he was married.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, the model. Let's talk about the model.
Oh God, the model. Oh dear. So anyway,
so are you calling him the model because you don't remember his name, or just like?
Well, I do. The funny thing is, I think I know his name, but the magazine that he's in, which I'll show you in a minute, they call him Simon, and I think, well, I thought he was called Kevin.
Oh.
But he's either Kevin or Simon. But anyway. So it was at Granny's, and it was one night. I was there on my own. There was nobody there for some reason. I don't know why. It was very quiet. Well, it was a Wednesday night. I mean, Granny's was like inside a sort of a concrete multi-story car park. It was this brutalist, huge multi-story car park in the middle of Portsmouth called the Tricorn, which they knocked down, which I don't think now they'd be allowed to, because it was part of that brutalist architecture. But even just going there, was like something out of an Ultravox video. It's a real sort of bizarre thing.
Sharp angles and concrete.
Yeah. And the cars and the lights and stuff, so it was all very, and then the music they played. But anyway, this one night was very quiet, and I was there, so I was sat in a sort of banquette thing on my own, with a drink, but I was driving, because we did in those days, we had a limit, but we still did have drink and driving, and he was there with his friend. And they were looking at me, and I was looking at them, and I was being cool and not trying to, come on to him. And anyway, he came over eventually. It was towards the end of the evening, actually, and said, "Do you want to dance?" And so we did this. We did a slow dance together, and it was electric, and incredible. And it was the first time that I felt a man's erection through his trousers during a dance, and it was like, this guy is absolutely beyond my league. But anyway, so at the end of the evening, because I had the car, I said, do you want to lift anywhere? And he said, well, my friend lives in Fareham, so could you give us a lift back? So I drove them back to Fareham and dropped them both off at a house, and went in for coffee. And somehow, Kevin, came back to the model. Ended up coming back to my place, because I had a flat in a little town over a shop, and we spent the night together. And it was just incredible. And he told me this story. You see, this is the point. He told me a story that he was a model. And I sort of took it all with a pinch of salt, what's a model doing in Portsmouth? I thought models were hanging out in London, and Soho and stuff. And he said he was a model and that he'd done a photo shoot in Morocco with Mary Rock, who's a famous photographer. And I'm thinking, really? Really? You're telling me this story?
I've already got you back to mine. You don't need to tell me any lies.
Yeah. And I can remember, even then it was really awkward, and because I was so naive, I didn't know how to progress things on to get him from the sofa into the bed, but we did anyway eventually. Anyway, so he told me this story, and I thought, oh yeah, I don't know. And then the next day, and so it was that night that he told me I was lovely and that he could fall for me.
Wait, that was the first night.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, really? This is all a bit heavy.
Yeah.
So that's why I pushed
I would have run
aside.
Yeah. I think you did the right thing.
Yeah, really? So, so the next day we got up and I drove him back to Fareham and he gave me his phone number. And I just so regret it to this day. And I went home and it was going through my mind, do I want to contact him? Do I not want to contact him? He's a bit heavy. He's coming on a bit heavy. He's not really my type. He was a model, and so he was quite camp, and he was quite, the way he moved was like a model. And so I burnt his phone number. I had this ceremony where I thought, right, that's it. I'm not just going to throw it in the bin, because I know in a couple of hours' time I'll be scrabbling around in the bin getting it out. So I burnt it. And then I thought, well, if I see him again, we'll see how it goes. But of course, I never saw him again.
Aww.
I never saw him again. And then a couple of months later, I saw this magazine.
Ah, yes, The Face.
The Face magazine, which was, this is some months later. So this was May 1983. And I bought it because Bowie's in it and I was a big Bowie fan. And then lo and behold, there's this fashion shoot of this guy in Morocco, and it's him.
Oh,
oh my God. And he's absolutely gorgeous.
He's a beauty, yes.
And he was really lovely. And, he was giving me the chance. I could have been a bit kinder and a bit nicer, but I just don't think at that particular moment that's what I wanted. I don't think I wanted a relationship with a guy. I just think, it was a bit of fun. But it was only, when this appeared later, I thought, my God, what have you done? And I never saw him later, but I did see him. I spotted him once in Covent Garden in London. I was in the Punch and Judy upstairs and looking down, and there he was. And he'd just obviously come out of a modelling agency or something, and he was looking stunning and obviously enjoying life. I was too far away to do anything. By the time I would have run after him or whatever, he was gone. So just that fleeting moment. So I would just love to know what happened to him.
Okay. But so what I need to say to you now, what I think you need to hear is, if you had kept his number and rung him, you would have gone on a second date and it would have been really lackluster. And then you would have been like, ugh, why did I bother?
Really?
Yes. Yes. Or it would have been like a 3-month affair that was just, a bit hot and cold and a bit ridiculous. And then it would have ended.
Well, he was obviously, he was based in London. I think, he was a model and he was doing things in London. I've not seen his face anywhere else, only in this issue. And, I've tried.
Isn't that funny? Like, if it happened today, you could be like, oh, I'll just find out what his Instagram is and I'll just message him.
Exactly.
And then you just couldn't do anything.
You couldn't do anything. Yeah. And I don't even know his name, really. Is it Simon or Kevin? I certainly don't know his surname. But
so you weren't tempted to ring all of the agencies in London and be like, do you have a Simon on your books? Do you have a Kevin on your books?
Well, not then. And I think, time passed and I just sort of forgot about him.
Yeah.
And it was, a few years later that I saw him in Covent Garden, and I just thought, you're enjoying life. You certainly don't need me in it. But I would just like to know that he had a good life. Yeah. Yeah. But there you go. But yeah, so Granny's got pulled down as part of the demolition of the tricorn, so it's no longer there.
And so when was Granny's pulled down?
I think back in the early 2000s.
Oh, okay. But you'd stopped. I'm assuming you'd stopped going by that point.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
when did you start to stop? What am I saying?
Yeah.
When did you stop going?
Well, I think when I met my wife, and I started working at the Festival Theatre in Chichester, and so I was again surrounded by a group of people who were quite theatrical and flamboyant,
and therefore very, very gay.
Well, surprisingly not. The people that I was with, mostly girls again, were not. But it transpires that certainly one of them was, who I am now very good friends with, and he is married to a guy and lives in London, and we've kept in touch all these years. And but he was closeted then, and we've had a conversation about it, and he said that he'd sort of told himself that he was asexual, that sex wasn't important to him because he could not face the fact that he actually wanted to be with guys.
And so like at that point when you were working together, did either of you kind of suss each other out, or was it just no? Oh. And so then how many years later was it when you had the conversation like, oh, hey, sames?
Well, I didn't tell him then because I was still married, and I'm pretty sure my wife and I were still, together at that point. We had a telephone conversation. I think it had been some time since we'd spoken, a year or two maybe. And it was like, what you up to? Girlfriends, Well, no, he said, but I've got a boyfriend. And it was like, what? And it was like, oh, right, okay, well, that's cool. That's amazing. But I didn't divulge anything to him about my situation because I was married, living with a wife. But I wasn't jealous. I wasn't sort of, I wish that could have been me. I wasn't sort of, wishing that life for me.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, to think that we worked in that environment where you would have thought that it would have been perfectly okay for people to be gay or bisexual or asexual or trans or pan or whatever. And I think it was, but it was just not spoken about. It wasn't talked about. I mean, I did, as I say, my wife knew that I'd had sexual experiences with guys. And I think it was around this time that I was starting to be a bit more open about my feelings and about what had happened to me. And I can remember going with actually someone who worked at the theatre to Brighton to a gay club, and it must have been Legends because that's the only one I can think of in Brighton that I know, and going with him there, and then he got off with someone and I didn't. And so
damn it, I hate when that happens.
Well, it was like, perhaps it's just not me. Perhaps it's not meant to be, and perhaps I'm giving off the wrong vibe. Perhaps I'm not that gay, and I'm not that.
Well, so you didn't score one night, and suddenly,
but all these things sort of, mount up.
There was a confluence of events. Is that what you're saying?
I think so. Yeah, and he got off with someone and was quite happy, and I didn't. So it was like, well, back to the drawing board then. Oh, I don't know.
Wait, what? Like, I may as well be straight because I didn't get off with anyone.
No, not that I might as well be, but the fact that I could be, and that I could have a relationship with a girl, and this girl happened to turn out to be, my prospective wife. And I think definitely after that occasion that her and I did get a lot closer. You know, maybe I said to her, I'm not really into that, you know, gay scene and copping off with people and you know, having one night stands and stuff, because of course I'd already done all that, you know, I'd sort of milked that one, I think. But
milked that one. I see what you did there.
yeah,
So you'd kind of felt as though, yeah, you'd got it out of your system and that you were ready to move on.
I think so. But also I felt something that I hadn't ever felt before, and that was that I was falling in love, and that I could spend a minute without this person. That's the difference. You know, I'd had to be with her all the time. And, you know, other girlfriends that I'd had, it was like, oh, you know, I'll make an excuse.
Yeah. I better go and see her. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, just sort of keep her quiet and satisfy her. Not in that way, but, you know, just to sort of not be disrespectful or whatever, as we are supposed to be, boyfriend and girlfriend. But with my wife, it was completely different. And we just completely clicked, and we got each other. You know, I think had my sexuality not been an issue, as in, you know, had I been 100% heterosexual, I think we would have been together certainly for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
I think we were a good couple, and we had fun together, and, you know, it was always a laugh. And we moved up to London together and started a new life and got new jobs, and it was all very exciting, you know.
But did you have like a conversation about like your past when you got together? Because you say she knew, yeah.
Well, I think I can remember a conversation when I went with this guy who I worked with to the nightclub in Brighton. And I can remember having a conversation with her, but that was like at the very, 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 very early days of when we were starting to get, you know, together. So she was just part of the group that we were hanging out with. And I do remember having a conversation and basically saying, I just don't, that's not me. It's not, you know, that's not what I want. I'm not into that, you know, and yes, I've had sex with guys and one night stands and stuff, but it's not really what I want. And I don't know what I want, but it's not that. So we did have that conversation, but I think that was the last time we spoke about it.
One of the biggest points of stigma for bisexual people, and again, like I'm using that term, although I know that we're not kind of fixated on terms.
Yeah.
Is that like, oh, you never date a bisexual because they're never happy with like sticking with one sex and they're always going to go off and sleep with someone else. Did you have like conversations about kind of what the rules were and whether... No,
it was, you know, I think we were both very naive. I thought that I could, as I say, compartmentalize it and control it and it wouldn't be an issue. And I think she felt that she could change me just through love, you know, and being together. We were very strong together. We were you know, a strong bond between us, a strong couple. So there was never a conversation about it. It was just, you know, oh, you know, I've had a few flings, and it sort of almost felt, well, I've got that out of my system.
Yeah.
But, you know, they were very different times back then. And it was very, very difficult, you know, to be who you really were.
And so, like, at what point, like, how long had you been married before you got to the point where you were like, actually, this isn't quite right for me. I need to figure this out?
Yeah, well, it was quite a long time. You know, time sort of slips by at crazy speed. So we lived in London, and then we moved back down to Chichester in West Sussex and had our first son. And I was, before that, working in Epsom in Surrey. And I was commuting, and she was working nearer to our home in Chichester, and she was earning more money. So it sort of made sense for her to go back to work, and she was quite happy to do that. You know, she was a career woman. She wanted a career. And so I stayed at home and brought up my son. And then our second son came along, and my first was at that stage at nursery school. And it was at the time when home computers were just starting to be a thing, and the internet was just starting to open up. So, of course, I had time on my hands. And what's the saying about light hands? The devil makes the devil.
Oh yeah, what is it?
The devil makes work of light hands, or
Yeah, yeah.
something like that. Anyway.
Sorry, I was just thinking about the startup sound from a modem when you were talking about the early days of the internet. It's just that was what was going through my head.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Oh God, it was dreadful.
It was amazing.
Well, it was amazing that you could actually, get this sort of interaction over the internet with other people.
Yeah.
And porn, of course, was a thing that was suddenly available in the privacy of your own home.
Yes. It took 5 minutes for a picture to load, but it was there.
Yes, exactly. And the trouble was, of course, that I had time on my hands because my eldest son was at that point at nursery school, and there's only so much hoovering and dusting you can do. So I was on the internet at this stage. Also, I was writing. I decided that I was going to write that book that had always been going around in my head. And anyways, because the internet was very slow, so anything that you got on the internet, you would download it to keep it for later, because then you could view it easier. And basically, I think what I did was not hide it well enough. I was desperate at that point for her to realize what was going on, and for myself to realize what was going on. That this couldn't be sustained. That I was sort of, in the shadows. My whole life was revolving around living in the shadows and putting on a false pretense and people are very, very gullible. They just accept what you show them. The face and the facade that you put on is basically what they think is genuine, and they don't question that. So there was this stuff on the internet. I also joined a chat room, a forum, and was talking to another dad a gay dad. And for some reason, I kept the dialogue that we had on a Word document somewhere. And I left it, and she found it.
Wow.
And that was like, that was the bombshell. And she was pregnant with our second child at the time. And it was really tough, really, really tough.
And so this conversation that you'd saved, was it a sexual conversation, or was it like a peer kind of support?
Yeah, no, it was very much of, I don't know what to do. I'm in this situation. I can't figure a way out. How do I do something with not hurting her? And
yeah,
I just needed other people's stories and experiences, because you genuinely think that you're the only one who's living that scenario.
Yes,
It's just not the case, but I just didn't know where to turn, and I was desperate, I guess. But thankfully, something I'd done. My subconscious had decided that I would leave this material. That, it wasn't sexual or anything like that, but I would leave it so that she would find it, so that she would realize what I was going through. But of course, imagine for her to find.
Yeah. So what was that conversation like then after she'd found it?
Oh, at that point, I'd got a small part-time job with some friends working in their office, doing some finance for them. And she was working from home. I think she was either on maternity leave or, getting quite close to that point. So she was working at home. That's how she was on the computer. And I got a call at the office, and she said, I've found, this stuff. Come home now. So I had to go home, and we had this conversation, and oh God, it was so ridiculous, because even then I was saying, oh, you must realize that that's not who I am. That's just a part of me. It doesn't change our relationship, and it doesn't mean I love you any less or anything like that, and I don't see us not being together. Well, of course, I was trying to find a way out, but even because she was obviously so distraught and so hurt by what she'd discovered, I was backtracking. I was saying, don't worry, we'll still be together forever.
And how did she respond to that?
Well, obviously there was tears, and it was really bad. But we had another child on the way, and I think neither of us could sort of see an easy answer to the situation, and we just fell into this looking after the children. And bringing a new baby into the world. And that was the important thing. But, in the following years, because we stayed together for, I think it was 4 or 5 years after that, we basically led more and more separate lives. I was the one who was at home looking after the children, and she was, so she was at work. She was often out at meetings and away for weekends on work dues and stuff. And so we just basically trolled along and made the best of it, really. But, after a number of years, there came a point where she said, look, I need to, build my own life, and I need to do something, and I need to get out of this situation. So she left the family home and set up her own home just down the road.
I mean, that's a super brave thing to do, isn't it? How did you respond? Yeah, how did you respond to that when she made that decision?
I thought, well, I just think it was part relief, really, part real sadness that we'd come to that point.
Yeah.
And that she was leaving me. She was, that was awful. Any separation or divorce is bad. And, people get separated and divorced for all sorts of reasons. So it's not just, obviously there is a stigma attached to it, but, people decide to change their life paths for all sorts of reasons. And it's, when you've got kids, it's just doubly awful because you have that responsibility to them. And that's not how you want things to be. But there was no alternative. So, and she left and set up home just down the road. So the children, they just thought, it's strange because since I realised that they never had that conversation about why mum and dad were splitting up.
Because that's what I was going to ask. Like, did you have a conversation with your wife about what you would tell your children?
No, it was all very strange, and things were unsaid rather than said. I can remember her telling me that she'd come to this decision that she couldn't carry on anymore, and I said, well, I can't tell the boys, I can't do it. I think you've got to. I will be here and we'll do it together, but you've got to be the one who tells them. And my eldest, he was very upset.
How old was he at this time?
I think he must have been 10, 10-ish.
Okay.
And I can remember him cradling our young son. Saying, oh, mum and dad are getting divorced. And he was really upset. And we were saying, no, we're not getting divorced. We're just separating. We're still going to be here. Mum's going to be down the road, and we're still going to be a family, and we're still going to do things together. And we did, we made an effort to be a family together. And so, another few years went by, and we settled into that routine. But by this stage, of course, I had more freedom. I had to realize that, now was the time for me to, explore my sexuality and try and find other men, other gay dads who were in a similar situation to me. And I did. I found a support group online, which was based in Brighton, not far from me. And so I sort of got in contact with them, and it was just such a relief just to talk to other guys, who had similar experiences, very different experiences, I have to say. Some really, really, acrimonious and really bitter and awful. And some, like mine, where they just sort of drifted apart.
And so I have in my mind this kind of image of like a town hall or a church or something where you all come together and sit in a circle. Is that what the group was like?
No.
Shatter my illusion. So what was it like then? I'm assuming you met in person as a group.
Yeah, we did. So this was an online group. So there was guys who were in it from all over the country.
Uh-huh.
So the organisers did was organise a couple of meetups each year. So one in Brighton and one in London, I think. And so everyone would congregate a couple of times a year, and basically, so that was a night out with people that you've been speaking to online.
Oh, okay. God, I thought there'd be like a box of tissues in a circle in like some shabby little town hall.
Well, no, but I think we were doing that online. We were, helping each other, online, I think. So that was good for me, but it helped me to find my path.
So if we go back to Granny's,
I wish we could, I just wish we could do that. That would be so fun to see all those people again. My mum's hairdresser turned up one night with his boyfriend, and I said to the boyfriend, "Oh, for God's please don't say anything to my mum."
How did you know your mum's hairdresser?
Well, because they were just down the road.
Oh, okay.
And I used to go to the same hairdresser.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, that was not the thing for me to pick up on. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. So so they spotted me and I spotted them, and it was like, oh my God! It was like, how do I get out of this one? So I had a conversation with the boyfriend, and I said to him, "Well, please don't divulge where you've seen me." He didn't, but the other one did. So it was like, you bastard. So then I remember Sunday lunch around my house, and I had a sort of girlfriend, I think, at that point as well. And we had a very turbulent relationship. It was very odd.
And was she there at lunch?
She was at the lunch.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And my brother was there, and, it was a family lunch. My dad wasn't, because they were divorced. And my mum, she'd saved this story up. She knew what she was doing. So because she used to have her hair done on a Thursday. So the Thursday was like the day after the Wednesday. So she saved this snippet up of information that she was going to divulge at the dinner table on the Sunday with my girlfriend there. And she said, what was his name? Graham. Graham said he saw you on Wednesday night at Granny's. What's that all about then? And I was like, oh, God.
And so at this point, what colour were you? Like plum?
Green, I think. And it was like this. And my girlfriend at that time, she knew, because, she was part of that sort of scene. And she sort of looked at me, and I was like, trying to hide in my dinner. And I said, "Oh, it's just they have this night on a Wednesday night, and they call it's the radical night." And that was it. And I'd sort of labelled it something else. I'd called it the radical night. It wasn't the gay night; it was the radical night. So where people who were a bit cool and radical go, And that was the end of it. And it was like, I don't know what she thought she was doing. I think, to be fair, she's no longer with us, but I think, to be fair, what she was doing was giving me an opening to say, you know what, actually, I'm gay. But of course, I couldn't have said that then. There's no way I could have said that.
Yeah,
then.
And you would choose to do that one-on-one, wouldn't you?
You would, yeah. Exactly.
I think she just didn't like your girlfriend at the time and wanted to give her a reason to be mad at you.
Maybe she was saying to the girlfriend, don't hang out with this guy because he's as bent as a 5-bob note. But also, when I said to my mum about uh, my wife and I getting married, she said her reaction was, "Why do you want to do that?" And it, and again, at the time, I just sort of thought, "What a nasty thing to say."
Oh, wow.
But I think she knew. I think she knew that, but she just couldn't. She could not, because she was like,
Yeah.
brought up in a time when those sort of things weren't talked about. She just could not have that conversation with me. She could not give me the space to tell her. Had she done so, it would have been a whole different story, I
That's
think.
so fascinating. So was she this type of, stiff upper lip kind of British, very like
No, not
nothing.
really.
Oh,
No,
okay.
no. She quite liked the gays. She was a bit of a fag hag with her hairdresser friends. She quite liked all that, and she'd be the one, who'd be sitting in the stalls at a Dick Emery show with her
Hmm.
handbag, laughing. You know, um,
But for her to say, why would you want to do that? Was that like particularly out of character for her, or was that something that you would expect her to say in a kind of
no,
jokey way?
I expected her to say, "Oh, how lovely! When's the wedding? Or I've got to get a hat, and I've got to think about what I'm going to wear, and oh, well, it'd be lovely to have grandchildren soon, or whatever." But no, her reaction was, "Why do you want to do that?" And I just thought, what a horrible thing to say. It was, and in my head, she was saying, "Why do you want to marry her?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can find
yeah.
something better." That's what I thought she was saying. But it's only, over time that I think what she was saying, she was giving me the opportunity, or what she was trying to say was, "Don't do it, because
Yeah.
I know what's going on."
Did you ever go to Granny's nightclub? Well, if you did, I would love to hear from you. Tell me all your stories and share any photos that you might have from those times through social media. You can find me on most every platform with the username KAndersonMusic. And you can also follow David on Facebook and Twitter with the username David Ledain, and check out the Rainbow Dads podcast, of which David is a contributor. Lost Spaces is not only a podcast, but a concept record as well. I have been writing songs about queer venues and the people who used to live their lives there, and will be releasing songs over the next year. You can hear the first single, Well Groomed Boys, which is also playing underneath my talking right now on all streaming platforms. If you liked this episode, I would really appreciate if you subscribed, left a review on Apple Podcasts, or just told people who you think might be interested in giving it a little listen too. I am Kay Anderson, and you have been listening to Lost Spaces.